When the USSR dissolved in December 1991, 15 nation-states were recognized internationally. I cluster them into 4 groups to better remember them: the Baltics, the Rus, the Caucasus, and the Stans. Today, I'll give a brief overview of the 15 so-called post-Soviet states, as well as provide information about their borders, language, currency, and capital city. I do understand, however, the term post-Soviet isn't necessarily loved by everyone, and there is controversy behind it and the contexts in which it is applied. So please note I am using it in the descriptive, not a prescriptive sense. I also finish each section with a brief argument about why you should take an interest in the countries in the cluster, perhaps even visiting them yourself. There's also a comprehensive reading list in the video description below. For now, let's begin. I'm Madeleine Rose Jones, and I study history, literature, and culture. Welcome to Snowy Fictions. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania make up the Baltic cluster of the USSR. In the 1980s, these 3 nations earned significant international attention for the Baltic Way, peaceful political demonstration of around 2 million who held hands across the 3 countries, a powerful protest against Soviet rule. Estonia's capital is Tallinn, Latvia has Riga, and for Lithuania, the capital city is Vilnius, also the largest among them here. With its proximity to the Baltic Sea, these 3 nations, as well as their northeastern European neighbours, are shaped by long cold winters and brief summers, although their positioning does allow for a glorious month or so of long sunlight in the summertime. All 3 of the Baltic states use the euro, are part of the European Union and NATO. When it comes to language, the Baltic region is so fascinating. Estonian belongs to the Finno-Ugric language, with related languages being Finnish and Livonian, some vocabulary borrowed from Swedish and German. Baltic region in general demonstrates the many encounters and, conflicts between German speakers and Russian, whether it is the Northern Crusades, the Great Northern War, or World War II. Moving on, we have Latvian, and like Lithuanian, are one of the 2 surviving Baltic languages. I must make it clear that none of the 3 languages mentioned are Slavic or Germanic. That's really important. The Baltic branch on the Indo-European tree is separate. And on religion. The truth of the Baltic states is complicated. These were the last 3 European countries to Christianize, with Estonia and Latvia adopting Christianity in the aftermath of the Northern Crusades and later turning to Protestantism. Lithuania is different, being the last European country to turn to Christianity in the late 14th century. With her ties to Poland and by results the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, Lithuania remained Catholic, whereas the other 2 Baltic states turned to Protestantism. There are 2 points to make. One is that paganism did persist in some ways, and there is exciting new research in academia about this. And second, and this is very, very important, is that the 3 Baltic nations, as currently recognized internationally, have a significant percentage of Russians and Russian speakers, who often adhere to Orthodox Christianity. No study of religion in the Baltic region today should omit this fact. The Soviet era of the Baltic states also led to vicious persecution and a stigma towards Christianity, and today we see the results of this for church attendance, how citizens describe their religiosity, and whether others consider the Baltic states as truly Christian. Last year, I had the pleasure to visit the 3 Baltic states and their capitals, and you should really do the same if you haven't already. Beyond their beautiful old towns and wonderful museums and eclectic art histories, there is plenty of heart and culture present in this region, and I had a wonderful time there. Ukraine, Belarus, the Russian Federation, and Moldova. What to name this cluster of 4 nations proved a difficult task, and are considered East Slavic, but ultimately settled on the Rus, as a reference to the Middle Ages and the various principalities found across there. Regardless, these four nations often do shape public perceptions, at least in the Anglosphere, in my experience, of what a post-Soviet state looks like. We'll start with Belarus, whose capital city is Minsk, and has both Belarusian and Russian as official languages. The currency used is the Belarusian ruble. For Ukraine, the capital city is Kiev, and the main currency is the hryvnia, and there is one official language, which is Ukrainian. Close by is Moldova. The capital city is Chisinau. The official language is Romanian with the Latin script, and the leu is the official currency. And of course, there is the Russian Federation, viewed as the successor state to the USSR, and also the largest country in the world. The capital city is Moscow. The official language is Russian, although some individual republics also have their own language alongside Russian, and the currency used is the ruble. In the case of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, the official languages belong to the East Slavic family. For Moldovas, Romanian is Eastern Romance, so not Slavic. Complicating the picture is Transnistria, a breakaway region of recognised Moldovan land, and the capital there is Tiraspol, the currency being the Transnistrian ruble. Religion in the Rus cluster, to simplify and perhaps generalize a bit too much, is Orthodox Christianity. Of course, the Russian Federation has various religions, from Islam in the North Caucasus and Tatarstan, to Buddhism and many shamanistic practices, particularly in Siberia. Yet prior to the USSR, which promoted state atheism, the Russian imperial state was embedded into orthodoxy. As for Ukraine, we have Catholicism in some regions, and within the Catholic population, some follow the Latin Rite, which the majority of Catholics in the world adhere to. But then, there are also Eastern Roman Catholics who are in full communion with the Holy See in Rome. Historically, as is the case for much of Europe, and certainly within the cluster in discussion, is Judaism. A notable Jewish writer from the Soviet Union is Vasily Grossman, and in the context of USSR history, the experience of Jews involves numerous persecutions, the Holocaust, and forced deportations into the Soviet interior. I will link some videos and books below that discuss the topic of religion in Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and Moldova in more detail. I must say, I've derived plenty of meaning and satisfaction in studying these four countries, even before I started studying fictions. For modern history and contemporary affairs, you'll find yourself always learning, whether it's about literature, science and technology, warfare, cinema, or diplomacy. The Caucasus Mountains stretch from the Black and Caspian Seas, touching both Europe and Asia. On the northern side, you have various Russian republics and oblasts, such as Dagestan and Chechnya, to name a few. South of that, you have the three nation-states of Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan. Armenia, to start with, has Armenian as her official language and uses the dram as her currency. The capital city here is Yerevan. For Georgia, the language is Georgian, and they use the Georgian lari for transactions, with the capital city being Tbilisi. And finally, there is Azerbaijan, with Azerbaijani being spoken and Baku as the capital city. Linguistically, the three languages all belong to different branches of the Indo-European language family. As it pertains to matters of religion and faith, we also note a similar diversity. Azerbaijan is typically associated with Sunni and Shia Islam. Armenia, on the other hand, belongs to the Oriental Orthodox Christianity, particularly the Armenian Apostolic Church. With Georgia, it is Georgian Orthodox Christianity. Please note that when I reference religion, I am not referring to constitutions or statistics about adherence. Many countries mentioned in this video are technically secular in governance. However, national identity, monuments, and heritage do point to either Christianity or Islam in many cases, as well as some minorities. This is a complicated topic, and I cannot give it the justice or the depth required here. Since the breakup of the Soviet Union, the Caucasus region has been plagued by numerous wars, with a notable conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia over Artsakh, or Nagorno-Karabakh. In 2008, the nations of Georgia and Russia emerged in a 5-day war over the breakaway regions of South Ossetia and Abkhazia. Today, Georgia, particularly the capital Tbilisi, has so many European Union flags. And this is something I noticed when I visited in 2024. Overall, I probably haven't given justice to the Caucasus region here, but I highly recommend that you yourself research it, maybe even visiting the 3 countries yourself, because these countries are so beautiful, so memorable, and deeply special. And finally, we reach the stands, found in Central Asia. They are Turkmenistan, capital city being Ashgabat, and the currency is the manat. And there is Uzbekistan. Tashkent is the capital, and they use the Uzbekistani som. Uzbekistan is also the home to well-known cities of the pre-modern Silk Roads, like Samarkand, Khiva, and Bukhara. We then move on to Kazakhstan, who use the tenge as their currency. The capital city was once Almaty, yet it moved to Astana in 1997. Curiously, well, for me, I find this very fascinating. Out of all the Islamic majority countries in the world, Astana is the coldest capital city among them. And there is Kyrgyzstan, who uses the salt and has Bishkek as its capital. And to conclude, Tajikistan. They have their own currency called the Tajikistani Somani, and Dushanbe is the capital. What is interesting about Tajikistan, and what's worth drawing attention to for Soviet history, is its borders. Whether it is Afghanistan, China, or the slice of Pakistan. When it comes to language, the Central Asian stands have Turkic roots. Whether it is Uzbek, Kazakh, Kyrgyz, Turkmen, and there is also Tajik, belonging to the Persian language family. Please note that the Central Asian stands, as well as the other countries mentioned in this video, have a considerable presence of Russian, being the official language of the USSR, but remains a well-used lingua franca for diplomacy, commerce, and inter-ethnic communication. Overwhelmingly, the dominant religion of the stands is Islam, predominantly Sunni Islam, yet the Pamir region has a significant Shia community, with religions rooted in Central Asian history include Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, Manichaeanism, and Nestorian Christianity. Also, an important part of Central Asian history are the Mongols in the Middle Ages, and later in the 19th century, the Russian imperial expansion, part of the so-called Great Game with the British Empire. I must stress that not all countries referred to as stands are part of the Central Asian cluster for the USSR. Both Pakistan and Afghanistan do not count here. What I find particularly fascinating about Central Asia is how they exist today. I have certainly noticed an increase among my fellow travellers about the stands, and there is fantastic journalism and opportunities to learn more about this cluster, so please check out my reading and viewing list, which covers all 4 clusters. Soviet history, of course, stretches much further than these 15 contemporary nations. The USSR would support the GDR in East Germany, as well as the often referred to Eastern Bloc nations, covering numerous satellite states such as Poland, Bulgaria, and Romania, to name a few. Bound through the Warsaw Pact, these governments formed a buffer zone to the Western Alliance, led through NATO and the United States of America. Also, in northeastern Asia, the Soviet Union intervened in Mongolia and in the 1950s embarked on the Sino-Soviet Treaty of Friendship, Alliance, and Mutual Assistance. In the aftermath of the Second World War and the unconditional surrender of the Axis powers, led to the annexation of more territory for Russia, such as the Kuril Islands. This is, of course, a short summary, and is not at all comprehensive of how the Soviet Union evolved and borders were shifted over time. I'm happy to make more content about Soviet, Russian, and Eurasian history in particular, as it is a keen interest of mine, so I do appreciate suggestions and feedback. Thank you for watching, and if you'd like, subscribe for frequent videos about history, literature, and culture. I also have a Substack and creative writing classes, all linked below. It is my goal to strike the ideal balance between educational and opinionated content, and that's why I encourage feedback from you today. Have a lovely day. Happy Easter, and I will see you soon. Goodbye for now.